If you've been a listener of the podcast for some time now, you'll know I love to chat about investing. But when it comes to investing, how can we actually grow our investment portfolios to the point where we're actually financially free? Well, to help me delve into how we can actually grow our investment portfolios, I'm joined with Sammie Ellard-King, founder of Up the Gains. Hello, Sammie, how are you?
Hello, I'm so good. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
No, you're welcome. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you for trekking down here to, speak to me in the studio.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. I'm like, as I was just saying, I grew up near here. I lived near here for many years. So it's quite cool coming back and seeing it all change.
Does it change a lot?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh my God.
Really?
It's just like gentrified. It's coffee shops like everywhere. Wasn't like that when I was in.
Welcome to London 2024.
Yeah.
That's every corner now. There's a coffee shop. There's
Kind of
Gales.
like Shoreditch has just moved up, and then it just keeps going now, and then you just keep going. Dawson's like that now.
Yeah, it's wild, but God, I love London, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
To an extent. But obviously, I know you very well, Sammie, and I'm very excited to chat to you today. But for those who've never heard of Sammie Ellard-King, please introduce yourself to everyone listening.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Sammie. I'm founder of Up the Gains, which is a personal finance education platform. Really just kind of teaching people what we should have been taught in schools. I know you probably get that line a lot in this podcast, but it's true. And to be honest with you, more people fighting the fight, the better.
Yes.
That's the way I see this. So, love collaborating with people like yourselves. And it's kind of just grown a lot lately. I think the conversation is like more important than ever. People looking for help from their banks or like older institutions and not really understanding what the hell they're talking about. So they come to people like me and you to kind of demystify the whole conversation and make it a lot easier to understand. And that's why we've got jobs, basically.
Yeah, literally. Grateful that we have got jobs from creating content. And obviously your platform has been around for a while now. It's taken off this year, which is so amazing to see. So how have you found the journey of growing Up the Gains?
Yeah, so I'm from a marketing background, so big on branding. I've always run big teams of marketing teams before. So I started with a website. So we have over 300 free guides on our website. Full SEO strategy was like heavy on like, please Google, give me some traffic, basically. And then was doing socials, but like just kind of like here and there. Yeah. And then kind of last year took it really seriously. We've had the podcast as well for a long time. So really the idea is like, if you're a visual learner or you like reading or you like listening, we're in all of those spaces to be able to access the kind of way that you can learn. So that's really was the plan. Trying to move all of those balls at the same time is
it's a lot.
It's a lot, as you know.
Lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But do you enjoy it?
I love it. I think it's, for me, my old job, I was a director of a hospitality business. So I used to send people drunk home in Ubers. And then I now, change people's lives with finances. It fills up your heart in a very different way. And just hearing, like we won Money Content Creator of the Year at the British Banking Awards recently, which was...
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was pretty nuts. When they sent me the feedback forms after... It was all of the votes and what they'd said.
Yes.
And that was actually the first time it made it like quite real for me, because I actually saw and people were like telling me exactly how I'd impacted them. Yeah. And like some people were like, I bought a house off things you said, like proceed X, Y, and Z of what you said, I got out of debt. And I was just like, whoa, okay, now I actually really need to take this seriously, because like if that's the case with just these people, imagine what's happening and they're not telling you. So how do we amplify that? That's the aim of the game from here.
It's a beautiful story, and this is why I love what we do, because you actually do hear some amazing stories. And yes, the algorithm sometimes doesn't work in our favor, but there will always be one person that's taken a piece of like financial guidance we've ever shared. And I always love that when they do come back to me, share some feedback and be like, oh, like this is what's happened because of this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and you forget the numbers online of real people. So I think that's so important that we do remember that. But obviously we're chatting all things money today, and on the podcast, I like to get my guests warmed up in the seat. So I've got a couple of like quick fire questions for you. So my first question for you is, if you won the lottery, what would be your first big purchase?
I thought about this one. I thought long and hard about what to say, and I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to say what it is that I want, because it's on my vision board.
Okay.
And it sits at the top, and that is a Porsche GT3.
Oh my gosh. So you're a car guy?
I basically, I grew up, my granddad was a racing driver.
No.
Yeah, so he loved cars, so he always had, or I was always around cars, and he had like a super old Porsche which he'd done up, and I just remember that, and it's that connection with him, I think, and why I just love that car so much. So if I got the money, it'd be silly not to. But I did actually contact the guy who's got, so when he passed, they sold his Porsche on, and I found the guy that's got his Porsche.
Wow.
So it's either that or buying that and then making that like an electric version of it.
And for context, how much do one of those cars cost? Go on, shock me.
You said the lottery, so it's a lot of money, right? Is that the only really small?
Definitely not like a 10k car, is it?
No.
Go on, shock me.
It's about 200,000.
Okay. That does eat into a lot of your like £1 million though.
Yeah.
Is it worth it for a car?
I think what I would do is probably drive it for a year, and because it was like lottery money, you wouldn't feel as bad, and then potentially sell it and then do something a little bit more sensible.
By the time you sell it, it'll be like 50k.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I think if you win the lottery, you've got to get one or two things which are like huge for you. Like, just like, well, as a kid,
never
you
have
never
bought.
have got, right?
Yeah.
Like whether that's a house or a car or whatever that might well be, and it really depends on your own situation, right? So, you know, like I'm quite fortunate to like not need to have to like worry. So I did get the car, but if I was like deep in debt and my, you know, so as my family members and all of that jazz, I'd be like paying off their debts and sorting myself out. I think the second thing I did play with this. This was my first one. I was like, I'll buy my mum a house.
Yeah, that is on my list. That is literally on my list. If I can like pay off my mum's mortgage, she hasn't got many years left now, so it didn't help me out much. But I'd love to pay off the rest of her mortgage. That would be like a huge.
Send everyone on a holiday and stuff like that. Like, I do all of that, but
yeah, of course. But the car's the big one.
Yeah, I just thought I'd say something a little bit
No,
controversial.
I'll let you off. And I guess my second question is, if you could go back to your younger self, so younger Sammie, what would be the one financial tip or piece of guidance you could share?
Yeah, I think it would be compound interest, because the first time I saw that, I was like, what the hell? Like, this exists, because the way our brains work, we see things like 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how we comprehend things. But seeing 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, or 12, 24, you know, that type of thing, our brains don't compute that, and you have to see it for that to actually to be real. And then once you understand it, you're like, whoa, okay, like what have I been doing for the past 10 years? Or even if I was like doing £10 towards all of this, it would have made enormous amounts of difference to me now. So I would 100% teach everyone about compound interest, and I'd like show them the visualization of it, because when you see the graph, you're like, 25 years, like, whoa.
Yeah. And it's
really
wild.
Does change everyone. Everyone I show it to is like, that's actually a thing. In 25 years, it basically I don't need to work. I could live off the interest. Yes.
Yeah.
So.
And this is why we're chatting about investing today. Like I mentioned in my intro, I love to chat about investing all the time. Investing is the reason why I started All Things Money, because again, I was like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. Why isn't everyone doing it, right? And obviously, you invest. You talk about investing too. So, when and why did you decide to start investing?
So my story is like a little bit different. Like, I'm not a qualified advisor. I'm not like, I haven't worked in banking. I studied music.
Oh wow!
I went into hospitality to open music venues and bars, and I got deep in debt in my mid-20s. So I was £24,000 in debt, and then I had like my aha moment while I was traveling, which was paid for by a credit card, sitting on a beach basically, and a friend turned around to me and said, you know, like, when do you want to retire? And I said, oh, you know, 50 would be nice, right? Not really knowing, right?
Yep.
And he said, well, when do you want to pass away? And I said, oh, 80 would be lovely. And he said, well, that's 30 years. How much do you spend a year now? And the answer, you know, let's just say £30,000. And that's £900,000. You're like, that's a lot of money. And he was like, do you have that? And I was like, I'm in debt.
Yeah. This is a deep conversation to have on the beach. Yeah. I'm always just sipping my margarita.
It was like 2 a.m. We'd been out.
Yeah.
You know, it was one of them ones. But then it just stuck in my brain. And when I got back, I was like, right, I need to change everything. Like, what am I doing? It's like keeping up with the Joneses. It's buying stuff I didn't need. Living in a completely like lifestyle, because it's just the way I was brought up. Yeah. I was just I didn't understand the value of a pound basically. And so I learned that and got myself out of debt in 18 months. And then it was like, right, we're at net zero now. And obviously everything that I'd learned along the way was like, right, it's time to start kicking into investing. So I'd done a little bit here and there, you know, tried being a day trader at 21 and, you know, lost a load of money on a credit card and stuff like that, just because, you know, you see it on a YouTube ad and you get fed it. And you know, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this can relate to that, or have thought about it and hopefully haven't pulled the trigger, because it's extremely difficult. Let me just be clear about that, and a high chance of you losing your money. But then sort of properly from sort of 26, 27, basically.
Wow. So how did you go about making that very first substantial investment? So one that is not day trading.
Yeah, it's a very different tactic. So initially I did the standard, like, buying blue chip companies.
Okay.
So I bought like Microsoft's, Apple's, Johnson and Johnson and companies like that. Because I had looked at funds and was just like, nah, that's not for me. I'm going to be Warren Buffett, and
Of course.
and had that whole thing, and actually did really well off them, and I actually still hold a lot of those to this day. But then I experienced some downturns, and you start to understand about how you feel about those downturns when they happen to you, because you know, market cycles happen. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail today, but the once you understand and you see your portfolio drop by 5-10%, you go, whoa, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Or you go, oh, I'm all right with that. And for me, I was like, I don't like that. And so I knew about funds a lot. And so then I've kind of switched my strategy as I've kind of grown in as an investor. So yeah, that was my kind of initial foray, and a few risky ones in there.
Yeah,
standard,
of course.
but
Yeah.
it's just,
We all learn, don't we?
Yeah.
And I guess for anyone listening right now who's never heard the term fund, what is a fund and what platform did you use to invest in those funds?
Yeah, so I really like Timmy's way of talking about this, and I talk about this a lot myself, actually, just because it works, right? Like, I see like funds as chocolate boxes.
Yeah.
So it's just like a box of celebrations. You go to the shop, you buy the box. Inside the box is lots of chocolates, and let's say that's the company. The shop is the stock market. You go and purchase that box of celebrations, but you're only paying one price. You're not buying each individual chocolate within that. And that's what a fund is, essentially. It's holding a larger basket of stocks together, and they can be in different sectors, countries, or indexes, which are simply lists of stocks, which follow a particular section of a stock market.
Yep.
So there are lots of different types of funds, do lots of different things. But they are a lot safer to invest into, because simply you are diversifying across the range of different stocks. So let's say, for example, Mars Bar does badly and Bounty does well, controversial.
Yeah.
But it hopefully will balance things out. So usually when there is a bit of downturn, some of the fund could be doing quite well, and that could bring things back to sort of normality. However, if you own one chocolate, like Mars Bar, for example, and Mars Bar has a bad day, that's it. You have no, like, there's no like benchmark that it's not going to come back. You are now exposed to that price.
No, it was beautifully said. I mean, why go for just the Mars one? We can have be greedy, because I'm a chocolate girl through and through. Why not? Literally, I love them all. Rather than the Bounty, I don't like Bounties. But why go for just the Mars bar? We can have the full box of celebrations, and that's exactly how you think about when you're investing in the stock market. So I love that analogy. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I guess my second question from that is, what platform did you use to invest in the funds?
So initially I used Hargreaves Lansdown
Okay.
when I was growing, like first starting out. Just simply I went for like, what's the best and safest and biggest in the UK at the time. I've since switched completely out of Hargreaves Lansdown. Not that they're bad in any way, shape or form, but there are cheaper options out there in the market. And so I am massive on fees when you invest. They're one of the biggest things that you should look out for when you look for an investment platform, simply because honestly, like 0.5% in fees over 10, 20, 30 years is literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds that you are giving to a company in fees, which could have been in your pocket. So a lot of these companies now, where technology's changed, they all do the same thing.
Yeah.
So like, pick one that has the lowest fees, and if they then put their fees up, move everything over to a different one.
Yeah.
Because as I say, they all do the same thing. And often the choice of funds, whether they name them differently, or some have just funds and not individual holdings, for example, like Invest Engine, who I think are brilliant. And so you just got to kind of weigh those things up. But yeah, Hargreaves Lansdown was my initial one, and I do actually still have my pension with them.
Yeah.
But have changed.
Okay, no, interesting. So yeah, I agree with that. I think platform fees are one of the biggest things you need to look out, guys, especially because, like you said, they actually do cost a lot of money over a certain period of time. Also, the range of investments offered, I think, is really important as well. So if you don't want to invest in funds, you need to find platforms that allow you to invest in individual shares, etc., etc. But yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. And obviously, you have now grown your investment portfolio to what, £130,000? Whoa! So people probably listening to this podcast and being like, that is an absurd amount of money, right? So how did you go about growing your portfolio, especially if you were in debt before? How have you now managed to impressively grow such a big portfolio?
Great question. I love this one. So it starts with like how much you can put in. And at the start, that was a small amount. You know, it wasn't huge. I wasn't paid enormous amounts of money. And also like I had to like change things in my life to allow me to invest more. So over time, that amount started at £50, then it went up to 100, it went up to 250. So anybody listening to this doesn't have to start at the number that I'm at today, and I'm quite open about how much I invest on my channel. But you know, now we're up to sort of 750 quid because business is allowing us to do that. And
Yes.
you know, but if you end up at £100 and that's all you can ever invest, that's fine too. Personal finance is personal, and I just want to make that sort of a big thing here. There's no competition between anybody. But I also side hustle massively outside of the business, and always have done anyway while I was in a job, and the profits from that went in to boost my investment portfolio, which has allowed me to grow it a lot faster. And as I've moved into sort of a different strategy, which I call the 80-20 strategy. Now the 80-20 strategy is literally 80% of your wealth goes into funds and 20% goes into more speculative investments, which can include individual holdings such as your Apples or your Teslas or things of those companies, but also things like Bitcoin and Ethereum as well. So what that means is that 20% of the investments could grow exponentially. However, if they fall, it doesn't bring the overall value of the portfolio down. The index funds kind of do the slow and steady kind of tortoise wins the race vibes. And occasionally, if you pick the next Amazon out of your individual holdings, you might get a big shoot up, and then I usually will sell it to bring it back down into line with my 20%. So if it suddenly is like 60-40, that fills me with dread. So I will like look to rebalance things or sell other holdings. So I'm holding 20% in a more of a risky environment. Now I do that because I'm in my mid-30s. How that looks for me is going to be very different to anybody listening to this. If you're in your 40s, that might have to be a little bit different for you. Definitely in your 50s, you'll be looking to more conserve your income. So, and if you're in your 20s, you might be a little bit more aggressive. So there are different tactics that you can use based on your age range, and it's very much down to your time horizon and how you see also your exposure to risk, which we spoke about earlier. Like, if things were to drop, how are you going to feel about that? These are all questions you have to ask yourself. But it's consistent investing every single month without fail. The money goes in, and you can. The thing is, it's beautiful these days as a beginner because you can just set it up, direct debit into an index fund, and literally look at it once a year. That's what my partner does. She doesn't even look at it. And then she looks at it and she looks at it and goes, oh, we're up 10% this year. Or we're down 4%. Oh, okay, cool. And she treats it like that. And it just goes out of her account. And she knows in 10, 15 years, she's going to come, look back and go, what a great decision that was. And that's what beginners kind of, I feel like beginners think they have to like sit there and look at trading charts and see all these
also
things.
have thousands to invest.
Exactly. 100%. That's a really good one. Like nowadays, for example, your Wealthifys or who are like robo advisors, is a type of investment platform that asks you questions. You can invest for £1.
So there's no excuse.
No, but I do want to be clear. Like, if you have consumer debt, you shouldn't be investing at all, and you should clear your consumer debt first. Even if that debt is 0% interest, you are basically. I see investing as there's a start line. If you are in debt, you are 1 foot behind. And when they say it's been in the Olympics, right? So the gun goes off for the start race, they will flag you as like
You're not ready.
you failed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got to go back to the start line, because what will happen at some point, the debt will weigh you down, and eventually you'll be like, oh, let me take out my investments to cover some more, or like I'll put more on that credit card, for example. You are not ready at that point to then grow your wealth. So you should always try and get yourself to the start line, and then get yourself rocking and rolling. And also, get an emergency fund together. So at least, I know everybody says 3 to 6 months. I think that's a lot of money. So I say get a month together, and then allocate a portion. So let's say you got £100, you might put £50 towards your emergency funds and £50 towards investing. So you're moving forwards in both ways. And as you can grow, you'll grow both at the same time, essentially.
Yeah, no, I love that. And especially the fact, and you guys have heard me say this many times on the podcast before, you don't need to be rich to invest. So I finally set my sister up to invest in the stock market. So she's using Wealthify, and she's starting with £50 a month. And I said, that's perfect. You don't need to have thousands of pounds when you first start, right? And I guess when you do find yourself in a position where you either see it, you're actually making dollar and you're like, oh, let me increase this, or you actually might start earning more. That's when you then can then increase your investments accordingly, or the amount you invest, because again, you're not set to a rigid amount of money. But I love the fact that you said you side hustle alongside running the business to help grow your portfolio. What kind of side hustles do you use?
Oh, good question. So I'm a big trainer buff.
Okay.
So I buy and resell trainers.
No way.
Yeah, I love it. So I actually only till recently, I stopped recently, but it's just great fun. Like I use an app called Heat Movement, which is a little tip for you guys. It's totally free.
Yeah.
And you can track drops when they come out.
Okay.
So the drop will come out. You can even set alarms that can like send you a notification. So you're ready, like 10 o'clock, ready to go, and you buy it. And let's say like a pair of Jordans or something can actually sell on the Nike website for like £100.
Yeah.
And then 4 hours later, they're sold out. They're not releasing that Jordan again. And you look on StockX and they're £300, £400, £500. So you can, if you get in there, you know, and buy a size 9 and a size 10, basically, that's what you want. And you can flip those. And so, you know, you can make £400, £500, £600 a month, sometimes off these. And then if you get lucky, you can also enter raffles for like, you know, Travis Scott's or whatever. They do big shoes. And if you win the raffle, obviously you set up like tons of email addresses and enter the raffles, right? That's what I do. And my mum and sisters and everyone's in. Yeah, everyone's in. And then, you know, if it ends up being your sister's email, you do give them a little kickback. That's like very important. But, you know, the Travis Scotts, for example, retail, you buy them and then they go for thousands of pounds sometimes. So it can be a very profitable thing. You just got to be careful, like to know that shoe isn't, say, you know, do a little bit of research. Like, is this actually a shoe, or if it's just like a black pair of Nikes?
Yeah.
They're probably going to be in JD in 2 weeks. So it's like, that's not a good investment. So just do a bit of research, like everything really. But trainer reselling, massive on that. I've done a bit of website testing here and there, just simply like on the train board, like do a website testing job. It's 10, 15 quid.
Okay.
And, you know, it takes 20 minutes and job done, and that money you can then put towards stuff. I'm massive on my saving what you're spending, so cashback and pretty much any kind of way that you can get discount on anything, and then putting that money back in. So I always just siphon it off and put it back into the investment account if I can.
No, I love that. I really love that, especially the trading reselling. Maybe I should talk to my sister about getting her into that, because she is huge on her trainers, and her birthday's soon, and best believe the next pair of trainers she wants are like £300-400.
I'll be honest, I kept quite a few.
Maybe you two should talk. I'll put you in contact.
But
it's crazy. And I think when it comes to side hustles, they don't have to be your business, but they can just be a hobby that you enjoy doing, or anything you can do really. But I really love the fact that you reinvest all of the money you make from your side hustles into your investments. So I think that's a really great way of people being able to grow their investments. Now, I guess another way people can grow their investment portfolios is by 1, compound interest, and 2, dividends. So would you be able to explain those two concepts for those that maybe have started investing? They maybe invested £100. They're now stressed because obviously at the moment there's currently like a bear market. How do those two kind of concepts help people grow their investment portfolios over the long term? Yeah,
so compound interest, 8th wonder of the world. Einstein called it that. I firmly believe him. Now I've seen it in action. So let's say £100 and you get 10% interest in year 1. We're going to assume that you get 10% interest across all of this. Obviously, it will differ, but for the sake of this, so that's £110 with £10 of interest. In year 2, if you were to get that 10%, you're now making £11 on interest, and then that's interest on your interest initially earned, and that's what compound interest is. Now, compound interest's best friend is time. And so the longer this works for, the more the interest is then working on top of the interest, on top of the interest, on top of the interest.
Yep.
And that's where you start to see really large gains in interest from the original principal amount.
Yes.
And actually what happens is if you continually do this over a long period of time, your overall contributions become a very small part of that, and the interest part is the bulk of that amount that you have left.
Yeah.
And compound interest works from, people get this confused, compound interest works when you're saving into a bank account as well. It's not just from investing.
Yeah.
So if your bank is giving you 3%, your money is compounding at 3% a year.
Yes.
So I feel like people think, oh, it's all to do with investing. It is, yes, absolutely, but it's also to do with any time your money is growing, it's compounding as long as it's growing each year, essentially. So I love compound interest.
Yeah.
Dividends is a fantastic way of also getting extra returns. So, for example, if your fund does 10% and the fund pays a 1% dividend, then you've got 11% growth of that year.
Yes.
Now, a dividend is simply, you can also get dividends from companies that you invest in directly. And basically, it's just a cheers for owning this.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Literally.
It's like profits from the share, then distributed to the shareholders. So some companies, for example, Tesco has like 5% dividend, which is like amazing, right?
Huge.
So you own Tesco, and let's say it does 10% that year, it's then 15% gains. And that 5% is guaranteed as long as they decide that they are going to pay that dividends. But you can look back at history and see how well they've, track record on these types of things.
Yeah.
Do they raise them? Do they consistently pay them? But when it comes to funds, there are 2 different types of funds, and people get this confused quite a lot. It's probably one of the biggest questions that I get. Like, which fund do I pick? It says all these weird like letters and numbers. And so basically you will see this when you go to like buy a fund. So it's ACC, or often DST, or income. So what that basically means is accumulation and distribution. So they're 2 very different things. When that dividend gets paid, accumulation means that it gets automatically reinvested, so that grows your nest egg a little bit faster. Whereas income is paid out in cash. Now people are like, cool, that sounds great. Give me some extra cash, right? But actually, what usually the right thing to do in this situation is to pick accumulation funds while you're in your wealth building phase of your life. And then once you get closer to retirement or in retirement, you then switch your money into the income funds, because you've got a larger amount. The income from that dividend is a lot larger to you.
Yes.
So that's when you would switch. So I thought I'd clear that one up.
No, and I think it's really important that you did, because that's actually something I never actually have touched on the podcast or on my platform. So thank you for explaining that so well. And I guess, when it comes to dividends, it's so funny because I've got 2 investment accounts. So I've got one, which is my stocks and shares ISA, and one, which is my lifetime ISA. Being self-employed at the moment is really hard to work out how much you can actually invest on a regular basis, right? So my main focus at the moment is my lifetime ISA. And at the end of the tax year, if I can afford to put more in my stocks and shares ISA, I do that. But I just love the fact that sometimes there might be a couple of months where I've not paid into my stocks and shares ISA, and I'll get an email from Vanguard being like, hey Ola, here's a cheeky 25 quid. And I'm like, what? For me?
Yeah.
I mean, I've just woken up, but yeah, I'll take it. And I think that's another part of investing that people don't realise, the fact that yes, you're investing your own money, but also you will also be rewarded for being a shareholder. And I think, again, that's something that's hugely overlooked, because I guess, again, we're not really taught about that, are we?
No, absolutely. I think I got one the other day from Free Traders. I did a review on them ages ago, and I must have left some money in there, and they sent me the email, and it was like, you've got 1p. And I was like, get in. But it's money that I didn't have, right?
Yeah,
it's money you didn't have. And obviously this grows over time. Now I get dividend payments from some of my stocks, and they're actually substantial amounts of money, which would be flights or holidays, and they make a big difference to your life, especially when you reinvest that money. So some of my individual holdings will kick out really good, and I've selected them for that reason as well. So I do believe heavily in the UK right now, even though we've taken an absolute beating recently from all different sides. We've had everything go wrong here that could possibly go wrong. But if you look at the stock market, and this isn't financial advice, I'll just make that perfectly clear, but when you look at American stocks, they're actually generally quite expensive right now, whereas the UK is crazy cheap if you were to compare the two.
Yep.
So if history takes its course, usually these things would start to level out a touch.
Yeah.
So the UK, technically, if you look at technically investing here, should see a little bit of a boom over the next few years. But that is not financial advice. And of course, I wish I had a crystal ball, because
Of course.
these things could go wrong.
Yeah.
As we know, like, this country could continually just keep shooting itself in the face, basically.
Literally. But it's so true. And I think that kind of concept of like a stock market sale is so true. And the fact that I've made my very first investment, I'm not going to say the company because I don't want people taking what I am investing in as gospel, but I invested in one company, and I think their shares were like maybe 35p, and I looked at the graph and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cheap compared to what they used to be worth. So over the last 4 years now, that investment is up 150%.
Wow. That's mad, isn't it?
Hindsight is obviously a wonderful thing, because I wish I invested like 10k in that investment, but just the money that I did invest, that is huge, and it's helped so profoundly with my lifetime ISA, because again, that lifetime ISA is money that I'm saving for my first home, so the gains on that is just astronomical. So yeah, I think it's really important to bear that in mind, guys, that, you know, you zoom out on your graphs. Even right now, where the UK is taking a beating, I think a lot of the markets are taking a beating right now. And that actually leads me perfectly into my next question, because we are experiencing this bear market, especially for someone like you who's got like 130k invested in the stock market, right? How do you get over the fear of potentially losing your money, quote unquote?
Yep, great question. So let's hark back to time horizon with this and having a long-term focus. I have a rule. It's called the 5-year rule. And any money that I may need in the next 5 years is saved into high interest savings accounts, and any money that I'm willing to potentially take a risk with or even lose is then committed to the stock market. And by having that rule, essentially that means that I'm kind of giving myself 5 years for that money to kind of compound and grow.
Yeah.
Now, if the markets were to experience a downturn like they are right now, I know that I'm not looking at getting that money out tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't really bother me, even though, you know, looking at my portfolio last week, I was like, bloody hell.
Yeah, cool. Same.
Yeah, down like $5,000 in a day, and you're like, wow, okay, you know. But then 2 days later, it'd almost come back to exactly where it was. So that's what happens. And interestingly, if you can stomach these things, and this is why you should start small, because you'll see these things happen.
Yeah.
And they will happen a lot, by the way. This happens 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year, depending on the year. And actually markets drop, which is called a correction, market corrections, which is a 10% drop or more, happen on average every 18 months.
Okay.
So when you understand that, and you've been through 2 or 3 of them, you're like, woohoo, Christmas is here. Why? Because nothing's changed fundamentally about those great companies which you believed in yesterday. They're still doing great things. They're still making profits. They're still driving growth. So just because the stock market is perhaps reacting irrationally, or, you know, a report or a bit of news has sent it into a little bit of a spiral, nothing has changed fundamentally. And I think that's really important for beginners to understand. So when you scan out and look at the time horizon here again, you're like, well, I'm not going to take this money out for 25 years. For me, I see this as my favorite coats are discount.
Literally.
And so this is why when I invest every month I put money in, let's say I put £100 in, I keep £10 or £5 in cash in the account. I don't invest that money. And I wait 4 days like this, where I can then go, oh, brilliant. Like, this is now 10% down.
Yes.
I thought it was a great company. Brilliant. Let me buy that company for 10%
less.
Because likelihood is that it's going to, 1, recover, 2, go further up. And I wouldn't have, hopefully, wouldn't ever have been able to have buy it at that price ever again. So that's the way I see it. And that is where you start seeing, for example, in 2020, when you see 20-30% drops, put money into play. Obviously, it's quite difficult to when you're in those situations, but you soon learn that the stock market is designed to go up.
Yeah.
That's literally what it's designed to do. It's designed to go up. But in the short term, there's high periods of volatility. So up, down, left, right. And it could look like it's just literally stagnating for long periods of time. But if you're buying like clockwork every month over long periods of time, you'll see it creeping up.
Yeah.
And you just have to scan out. Look, press max in the
Yes.
total stock market and look at all the drops. And then look how quickly it's recovering. And look how quickly it's going up again. And obviously we've seen like technology play a massive part in the rise of the stock market in the last 30 years. And that's only going to continue. Like, look at AI, look at all of these things that are driving the markets now. So yeah, I don't panic in situations like that.
Yeah, and I think if you are going to panic, investing is not for you. So I think, again, it's about looking at your investment risk. Like I said, I haven't actually looked. I don't want to look, but I know my investments will be slightly down, which is absolutely fine because I'm planning to invest for like the next 5 to 10 years. So in my lifetime ISA, yes, that is meant to be my deposit. Again, that's not a deposit I'm planning on using for the next 2 to 3 years. So I still have a bit of time to play with the stock market when it comes to my lifetime ISA. So guys, if you are listening, that's something to really bear in mind. But I guess, Sammie, to round up today's conversation, my final question for you is, if you could give one tip to those who have listened to this whole episode but are still a little bit too scared to invest, what tip would you give them?
Start small. Just put 10 quid into an index fund and watch it for 3 months. Don't do anything else. Just watch what happens. Log in the morning, like, oh, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
This type of news happens and this happens. This happens and then this happens. And then just understand it, because then you'll start to get a little bit of a feel. You'll go, oh, okay, cool. And then when you actually start to actually go and put money in, you're not going to care as much about the like ups and downs, because you're just like, cool, that's what happens, right? You're over that initial hump. And so I think that's quite, like, if you're super scared about it, that's a really good way of just kind of going, oh, okay, cool. Or if you really need to, open a virtual account and do exactly the same without any of your own money and just watch it every morning, log in. Oh, okay, this is what's happening. And I think that can really help people kind of get over it, because it is massively important to invest. There is so many like reasons to invest that kind of get over, like, I think the pros outweigh the cons
100%.
in a lot of ways. It's just about understanding your appetite for risk, how much you're willing to contribute, how much you're potentially willing to lose, and also diversification as well. Never put your eggs into one basket. Like, if Dave down the pub tells you to buy this new altcoin and you're like, you haven't invested any money into, say, index funds and a few other things and maybe a couple of bonds, don't go and put your £5,000 life savings on that because you think it's going to grow. That's gambling.
Yeah.
When you invest, think long term, and yeah, you'll do quite well, hopefully.
No, well, thank you so much, Sammie. That was perfect. I really enjoyed chatting to you about your journey because you talk about it so much online. I was like, I have to speak to Sammie in person because I want to know how the hell he managed to grow a portfolio of 130k. So, guys, I hope you listening or watching have enjoyed tuning in and learning about that journey. And also, hopefully, you feel a bit more motivated to, 1, invest if you haven't already invested. 2, if you are currently invested, to continue because it's so worth it. Or 3, just to continue the education on investing, because I feel like we touched on different aspects that I don't think I've ever spoken about on the podcast today. So thank you so much, Sammie.
Thank you. I've loved it.
And I guess before I let you go, you create amazing content online. You've boomed this year, which is so motivating to see. It makes me think, Ola, just continue. So if anyone would like to follow you online, where can they go to do so?
Yeah, so we're Up the Gains Money on all social platforms, and upthegains.co.uk is the website, and we have quite a big financial course coming out as well, which help people save and invest and increase their income all in one go. So it's kind of like what we call it 1, 2, 3 financially fit.
Okay.
And that is coming out very soon. And if you want to check that out, it's 123financiallyfit.co.uk.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Sammie.
Thank you.